Those screws keep vibrating loose in my machine when I turn it on. I better secure them with some lock nuts. Locknut. L-O-C-K-N-U-T. Locknut. In another installment of the never-ending series called Words That Describe Things That Stick Other Things Together, we have another word for you. Locknut. Locknut is a thing that is involved in sticking other things together. So there are other words in this family that I just made up right now, and that's probably the title of the most boring magazine ever, but in fact, it's actually quite interesting. So for example, glue sticks things together, right? Nails stick things together. Velcro sticks things together. Screws sticks things together. Screws and nuts, in fact. Like screws alone, they might dig in the threads or the teeth. They might spiral and dig right into a material like wood screws, for example, and they get stuck in there. And so you can stick two pieces of wood together or stick a sign on top of wood. But what happens when that wood is too thin? Or if you're screwing into a piece of metal and it's too thin and the screw sticks out the other side and it's just loose like that, well, you got to use a nut. You take a nut which fits over the screw threads and fits right on. You spin it right on. And it helps lock things together. But a nut by itself is not a lock nut. What is a lock nut? It's a very special kind of nut that goes over a screw. And if you Google it, you can see many, many different pictures of different types of lock nuts. But all it is a special nut that resists loosening off of a screw. And a classic one that I used to see when I used to work with them was like I would build some robots, and because robots have moving parts, every time you turn on those motors, things jiggle around and shake. And so my example in the very opening of this podcast was kind of an accurate one that I've probably said, where the screws keep loosening. The machine screws like kept getting loose over time. Every time I would turn on my robot after a week, I'd notice that everything was loose, and that's not good. You don't want arms falling off, for example, 50-pound pieces of metal falling onto the floor and everyone else around. So instead, you want to secure this better by using maybe a lock nut. And so a lock nut has on one side maybe something that digs right into the material. You might also have things that have nylon in the internal side of the nut so that it kind of fills in all the gaps between the screw and the nut, and it like compresses everything and applies extra forces there so that the friction between the screw and the nut is really high. So there are different ways of having a nut lock right onto a screw, and that's kind of neat. It's a mechanical engineering issue. So that is a lock nut. It is a special nut that resists loosening off of a screw. That's our engineering word of the day. Thanks for listening to another episode of Engineering Word of the Day with your host, myself, Pius Wong. I am an engineer in multiple disciplines, but I also work in education. And I have an engineering education-related podcast called the K-12 Engineering Education Podcast. You might be really interested. So go on over to k12engineering.net to find out more and subscribe. Thanks.